Dinner do-over. The new White House Correspondents Dinner isn't serving leftovers. It's serving a more modest, more secure event. We'll explain. Tariff, war of words. President Trump plans new tariffs on Canada, and the official up there who still refuses to buy American liquor and wine weighs in. And palmetto primacy. Democrats choose South Carolina to go first in 2028, why they think a Southern strategy might work. Speaking of South Carolina, if you're unfamiliar with Kiowa Island, Charleston, Greens, these are places we're going to be talking a lot about in the next few years. We'll get to that as we get closer to 2028. But welcome to the Takeout. I'm Ed O'Keefe, in today for Major Garrett. Tonight here in Washington, members of the White House Press Corps, of which this correspondent is a proud member, are gathering again with colleagues and bosses and many of the people we cover in the Trump administration for Take 2 of the White House Correspondents Association dinner. This is the event rescheduled after April's dinner was suddenly interrupted by an attempted presidential assassin. You'll remember this scene as the president, first lady, and other guests realized there'd been a disturbance in the Washington Hilton. An armed would-be gunman ran through what had been a security checkpoint and was stopped, mostly by his own apparent fall, as he tried to storm a ballroom below packed with roughly 2,600 ticketed guests. The president, first lady, vice president, and dozens of other VIPs were quickly whisked out of the room. Eventually, our own Weijia Jiang, who chaired the Correspondents Association and the dinner at the time, stepped out with these words.
On a night when we are thinking about the freedoms in the First Amendment, we must also think about how fragile they are. I saw all of you reporting, and that's what we do. Thank God everybody is safe, and thank you for coming together tonight. We will do this again.
What this correspondent will always remember about that night is, first of all, Weijia's incredible poise and ability to calmly explain what had happened to the world. But perhaps more vividly, I'm going to remember what many of the White House correspondents in the room did next. With the world watching, we ran back to the White House. Some even rented city bikes and scooters to get there faster in their heels or a tux. The mad scramble back to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue happened even when our lives were at least briefly in danger. We got to work figuring out what had happened. What was a terrible moment, and one that could have been so much worse, was arguably the finest hour, at least I'd witnessed as a member of the White House Press Corps. Now look, covering the White House is by no means like covering a war or being on the police beat or showing up like the woman next to me does often to cover mass violence in this country or around the world. Reporters who do that are the true heroes of this line of work. But it was the finest hour for those on the presidential beat, I'd argue, because some nights the work's about yet another attempted attack on the presidency and a serious security vulnerability. And some days the work is focused on heady issues like war, tariffs, and presidential politics, as it is today. So we celebrate all that again tonight. Not the president, the man, or the institution, but the people who cover that man and institution, and most especially the constitutionally protected right affording us the ability to cover him. You might not like that the guest list includes the president or people who work for him, or the appearance of journalists mingling with the people they cover, but just remember the intent of it, to celebrate the First Amendment and everything and everyone that amendment protects, and the people like Weijia and the CBS News team and hundreds of others who partake in that right every day and cover the most powerful institution in the world. So let's turn now to CBS's Nicole Skanga, one of those who covers issues of violence and security on a regular basis. Good to see you. You are here because you are monitoring for what is now expected to be a pretty revamped Secret Service operation tonight at this dinner.
And very different. First of all, well said, Ed O'Keefe. Second of all, since you're a trivia guy, I will share with you that the Washington Hilton has hosted the White House Correspondents Dinner 62 times since 1968. And
Really?
This will be the first time that it is somewhere else, and in this case, the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. So the dinner has a new home, which means it has an entirely different security checkpoint. And in a very rare appearance today, the Secret Service director came out this week with the Deputy Director, Matt Quinn. And we were asking a lot of questions about how will this be different? How will it be a redo? And he said, look, this is an entirely different venue. So there have been separate site assessments conducted by the Secret Service for this specific event. At the Waldorf Astoria, hotel guests and dinner attendees are going to be routed through entirely separate entrances. We did not see that at the Washington Hilton. Dinner guests have to pass through a single controlled access point where their credentials are going to be checked before they can get anywhere near the ballroom. That's also new. Outside, the security is going to be unmistakable, both physical security barriers and, this is rare, Secret Service personnel outside of what's called the clean zone. So mulling about outside of the hotel, in part because of deterrence, letting people know that they're there. And you'll see both officers in plain sight and officers in plain clothes. So there's going to be a little bit of both there. Obviously, this stepped-up posture also comes amid an absolutely unprecedented time for the Secret Service, and we can talk a little bit more about the threats.
You mentioned this morning that they have already, through July, protected 3,000, was it, individual events?
Beginning since January, the Secret Service has protected 3,000 different events for all of the protectees, I should say, not just the president.
Right. That's like a Trump speech, a Vance appearance, the Obama library opening.
Yes.
All sorts of 3,000, though.
Mark Wayne Mullen, who's the DHS secretary, or anything the Treasury secretary does, or if Stephen Miller goes on an official event. And the agency has opened up roughly 10,000 protective intelligence cases since January. So to give you a sense, every time there's a threat to a Secret Service protectee, another investigation is opened. Compare that to last year, it's about 40 times higher. Now, why is that? Or I should say 40% higher, Ed. Why is that? We're seeing a slew of online threats. We're seeing this sort of global threat environment with the ongoing war with Iran. Those threats are very, very real. And of course, you have lone actors that are still a concern for the Secret Service, and 10 times more mental health interventions this year than last year, which is a lot.
And they're asking for the public's help more actively than they have before.
That's so interesting. If you remember during the UFC event, it was actually the suspect's mother that stepped forward and said, hey, take a look at this. And that's how that threat, that plot was thwarted. So they're actually asking the public, if you see something or a neighbor, a friend, a colleague is showing a behavioral indicator of targeted violence or just acting a little bit funny, come forward. We need the public's help in order to handle all of these thousands of cases.
All right. Nicole Scango, who covers Homeland Security and Secret Service, among other things. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. And a quick programming note, you can watch live portions of the White House Correspondents' Dinner right here tonight on CBS News 24/7. CBS's Nicole Killian joins me now from the White House. Nicole, good to see you. Do we have any sense from the White House of what we can expect in the president's remarks tonight?
Well, to put it in the words of Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, she said that the president's speech will be a combination of, quote, unifying yet vicious and serious yet hilarious all at the same time. She says that the president's speech will, if anything, be entertaining. But obviously, we know that this could take on potentially a different tone, contrary to what we saw back in April, given what happened then with a gunman busting into the Washington Hilton shortly before the president was set to take the stage. So this, as you know, Ed, will be a more smaller, a more intimate setting. So we will see how the president delivers his remarks accordingly. I did have a chance a short time ago to speak with Stephen Miller, the president's deputy chief of staff for policy. I asked him how he was feeling about the event, and he told me that, by and large, he is grateful for law enforcement, specifically grateful for the Secret Service and all the work that they have put into this event to make it safe. And he acknowledged, hopefully, too, we can also have a little bit of fun tonight.
Vicious but funny is how she put it? That's what we should expect tonight?
That's how she put it.
All right. A more pressing matter, perhaps, something I know the president talked a little bit about a little while ago, is, of course, the conflict with Iran. What are we hearing from him and from the White House today about what we should be expecting?
Yeah, well, obviously, as we have seen this constant back and forth between the U.S. and Iran with these ongoing strikes, the president did acknowledge that while the end goal here remains to ensure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, he did say that both sides are talking. Take a listen.
They want to make a deal. I just don't think they're ready yet. But they do want to make a deal. Sometimes they don't want to say they want to make a deal. They want to be the tough guys. But they do want to make a deal. There's two ways. I mean, it's you can just keep doing exactly what we're doing and take them apart piece by piece. We could do it in a more rapid fashion, which we might do. or we can negotiate with them, which we're also doing right now. I mean, as we speak, we're talking to them.
Now, the president continued to say that the U.S. remains locked and loaded as far as its dealings with Iran if this violence continues to escalate. But in terms of those negotiations and talks, you know, he said that he is not necessarily in a hurry here, that he is not concerned, for instance, with respect to the upcoming election, that it really is important to get it right. So, again, you know, we have heard time and again from administration officials continuing to leave that a diplomatic off-ramp potentially open, so time will tell.
It sure will. Nicole Killian at the White House for us. Thank you on this Friday afternoon. We're joined now by CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd for a little more on this conflict between the United States and Iran. They're not ready yet, he says, about talks. That's what he's been saying for more than a year now. And now we're going into our 13th night of strikes. That was last night. Especially now hitting sections of Jordan, which, of course, is a key ally in the region. Assess where we are and where we may be headed next.
Where we are is it seems that we are a war without a strategy. Clearly, the Iranians are escalating their attacks against the United States. And, Ed, we have tens of thousands of troops in the Middle East. We have thousands of diplomats, not to mention intelligence personnel, and hundreds of thousands of Americans. The Iranians could kill Americans for the next decade if we don't find some kind of off-ramp to this conflict. By the same token, CENTCOM keeps publicly stating that they've launched another round of strikes and eliminated more targets. But guess what? This is like a game of whack-a-mole, to quote a previous president. We could be at this for a long time. And if history is a guide, Iran was willing to fight a war with Iraq for several years. And certainly we don't want to burn several years in this conflict. We'll lose more service members, we'll lose more Americans, not to mention billions of dollars. And so the key question is, what is actually going to bring the Iranians to the negotiating table? It is certainly not missile depots being blown up. It is certainly not President Trump making comments on television that they're terrible people. Undoubtedly, they're going to have to feel some kind of pressure from other countries, like China perhaps, to get them back to the table.
Speaking of China, today on True Social, the president went out of his way to say he doesn't believe China nor Russia is arming the Iranians. Where did this come from, and is that what national security officials would assess?
That is, according to reporting, at odds with what intelligence officials assess. There's reporting that Russia has perhaps been giving the Iranians intelligence on where, for example, U.S. intelligence officers are stationed. And again, if history is a guide, President Trump has oftentimes offered his own analysis on intelligence matters that are grounded in perhaps a gut feeling, something he sees on television, and has not actually received intelligence briefing on these matters and ingested that into policy decisions. So certainly we don't know where this came from, and he may be operating on just a hunch.
Or is he trying to maintain face with Xi and Putin for some reason to not offend them?
He might be, but then again, he issued this very odd press conference a week or so ago claiming China interfered in our elections, despite the fact they were downloading publicly available information. So he's not really worried about offending a lot of people. But do remember two things. First, Trump is scheduled to host a state visit or a state dinner for Xi in September. And also, China is the largest purchaser of Iranian oil. China had stockpiled Iranian crude earlier in the year out of fears that there would be some kind of conflict. Those inventories are running low. So China certainly needs more Iranian crude product to hit the market. And so perhaps that's something Trump is trying to leverage.
All right, we'll leave it there. Sam Vinograd, national security analyst for CBS News. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. Now, this week, there's also seen an increase in tensions between the United States and Canada, most especially because the U.S. today imposed a new 10% duty on Canada. In all, 60 countries are being hit with a tariff that's kind of similar to what the Supreme Court said was illegal back in February. But it's an obscure law that the president's now exercising, and it may be challenged. There is an even bigger battle now over 50% tariffs on Canada that are set to take effect on August 19th. They cover a wide range of Canadian goods, as you see there, including honey, liquor, cement, dairy products, and yes, hockey sticks. In response, Canada held a ribbon-cutting ceremony today for the new Gordie Howe International Bridge that's set to run between Windsor and Detroit. But there was no presence of the United States at this opening. It's set to open on Monday. The two countries plan to celebrate the opening of this key economic artery So earlier today, we spoke with Ontario Premier Doug Ford, good friend of the Takeout, he's here every so often, about this new bridge, the tariffs, and much more. Premier Ford, thank you for joining us. I know you're standing on the Canadian side of the Gordie Howe Bridge, named for the hockey great,
Yes.
that is set to open next week. This was supposed to be an international celebration of a pretty historic infrastructural and economic achievement. It is not going to end up that way, as there won't be a joint U.S.-Canadian ceremony, but there was a Canadian one today. And I want to call out the fact the president a little while ago on Truth Social said Canada disinvited the United States of America to the opening of the Gordie Howe Bridge, which is fine, considering they are paying substantial tariffs to the United States. But the original deal on the bridge, which was terribly negotiated by a previous administration, no longer stands. We changed the terms of the deal so that the United States of America now gets 50% of the profit. Is that your understanding of what this deal is?
Well, that's not quite, but it's close. But at the end of the day, Ed, first of all, thanks for having me on. This is going to create jobs on both sides of the border. We have over probably $52 billion U.S. going back and forth in trade, two-way trade. It's going to give an opportunity to create tens of thousands of jobs on both sides of the border. So we're happy it's getting open on Monday.
The fact that even the building of a bridge couldn't bridge the divide between the United States and Canada right now, what does that say about where relations are between the two countries and the fact that leaders can't seem to get together and even celebrate something as significant as this?
Well, it's been bumpy, but let's just remind the great American people, which I absolutely love. I say it every time. Canadians love Americans. I know Americans love Canadians. We didn't start this trade war. President Trump decided to go after his closest ally and friend, his #1 customer in the entire world. And yes, the U.S. is our #1 customer. It's unnecessary. We have to make sure that there's certainty that will create jobs and opportunities and production and lower cost of goods. Well, that was the total opposite is happening right now. And President Trump ran on lowering cost of goods. They're going up. Campaigned on certainty. Anything but certainty in both countries right now. And it's unfortunate he took this avenue with his closest friend and ally.
And there is set to be another round of this now, starting in mid-August, new tariffs on about $20 billion of Canadian goods, if I'm reading things correctly. Do you have any sense yet of how or what specifically in Ontario's economy would be affected by these new tariffs?
Well, I'll tell you what's going to affect the American people. It's going to be $14 billion of taxes, and it's going to create less jobs and higher costs. So it's unfortunate that President Trump decided to tariff his own country and tax his own country. We want to make sure that we create more opportunities, more jobs, and that's just not happening under President Trump right now.
Is there some element, though, of the Ontario economic sector that's going to get hit hardest by this potentially?
Well, we have to see exactly what are going to be tariffed. But I've told the Prime Minister, dollar for dollar, tariff for tariff. And who does that hurt? It hurts the population in the United States, hurts the population in Canada and in Ontario. This does not work. Protectionism does not work anywhere in the world. We're the two greatest countries in the world, the largest open border in the world, two closest allies, and we didn't start this war. President Trump decided to economically attack Canada. They're your #1 customer. I'll give you an example. Just Ontario alone, Ed, 9 million Americans wake up every morning to produce a product, a widget, or a service for Ontario alone, not including the rest of Canada. And now there's gonna be hundreds of thousands of people losing their jobs if these tariffs continue to happen.
So why then suggest to the Prime Minister, let's go dollar for dollar on this? Why not try to tone it down as opposed to amp it up?
Well, tone it down. When someone comes up and punches you in the face, not once, not twice, 10 times, you have to stand up to that person. Someone in the schoolyard wants to take your lunch money, you're going to fight back. And I've encouraged the Prime Minister to fight back. I'll do it in Ontario. And people talk about the liquor, the $1 billion. We're the largest purchaser of liquor in the world. I would love to have the U.S. liquor back on our shelves, the wine, the bourbons, but not until you get rid of the tariffs.
I was going to ask you about that. So it takes, again, the total elimination of this for you to start buying bourbon or California wine again for Ontario's liquor stores.
That's right.
Since this trade war began, we have seen the Prime Minister widen his scope, if you will, economically and even from a defense standpoint, with visits to Europe, Saudi Arabia most recently, China as well. I'm curious, most especially if you think this latest round of tariff battles draws Canada even closer to China economically.
I wouldn't say China at all. What I'd say is countries, our allies around the world, we're diversifying our trade. We've increased trade in excess over 100% in the European Union and in other areas. And these are jobs that once came from the United States that now are being shipped overseas, and we're being more self-sufficient. Any products that we need, we're starting to produce here. So again, President Trump thinks it's helping the American people. Anything but helping the American people. Is driving up costs. All you have to do is look at the cost of a home, look at the cost of groceries in the U.S., look at the cost of gas. So cost is going up. It's not going down ever since he started this trade war with Canada.
All right, Premier Doug Ford of Ontario, to be continued.
Thank you.
But congrats on the bridge. We'll see if it opens as scheduled next week.
Thank you so much. And I just asked senators, congressmen, and governors, contact them to talk to the president, because one day you're going to rely on these jobs and you won't have a job if he continues with these trade wars. Thank you.
Thank you. Tough talk there from Canada, but still to come on the Takeout. South Carolina is poised to prevail in a Democratic fight over who votes first in their 2028 primary. The debate divided political leaders. Also, new polling in the critical Senate race out of battleground Georgia. And Senator John Ossoff hold on to power? Our political reporter panel will weigh in. And then there's Philadelphia. It has the world-famous cheesesteaks, the Rocky Saga, the really annoying Phillies fans, and now King James. A look at LeBron's move to Philly and if the 76ers can now compete with my New York Knicks after we crushed them in the playoffs. Yes, we don't forget. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. South Carolina is now on track to be the first state to vote in the 2028 Democratic presidential primary. That's right. We're talking about 2028 in the summer of 2026. This is what you have to do. The DNC panel made the recommendation today, beating out Nevada and setting up a pretty interesting series of states that are set to vote early this time, some of them never having been in this position before. Our Zach Hudak was at these meetings today here in Washington. He is right outside the room where it happened. Mr. Hudak, good to see you, sir. Give us a sense of what exactly it is that put the Palmetto State of South Carolina over the edge today.
And I think what this really came down to was a debate over whether the Democratic Party should double down on the voters who have been most loyal to it in the past, or if it should try to bring over some new voters. So when you look at South Carolina, that is a state that is in about a quarter of the voters in that state are black, and it's nationwide. Black voters in recent elections have voted for the Democratic candidate in presidential elections between 85 and 95% of the time. So you can see why they've been integral to Democratic success in these national elections. On top of that, if you look at states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, those aren't states that were even part of the conversation today, but those are states that are part of the so-called blue wall, where if Democrats want to have success in those states, they need to win cities like Philadelphia and like Detroit and like Milwaukee. So this is, in a lot of ways, a virtue signal to voters even in those states that if you're a black voter who has consistently supported the Democratic Party, they are giving you a little bit extra say through voters in the state of South Carolina.
You know, this is a continuation of a theory that President Biden put in place ahead of the 24 calendar, which of course wasn't going to matter, but that he wanted to influence because he was party leader at the time. He made the argument South Carolina and or Georgia should go first to reward the overwhelmingly black Democratic base of support and put black voters in a position of real influence, the way they helped him win the nomination back in 2020. So they're in essence now trying to exercise a theory that Biden first put in place that may or may not work, and certainly comes at the expense of places like Iowa and whatnot. I know you spoke to the chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, who must be thrilled about this because now her dance card's going to be full. The TV stations are going to be reaping in the ad dollars. The restaurants are going to have plenty of big events, as are the high schools and the bars and gymnasiums. What did she have to say about all this?
And she told me that this was the right thing to do, that it is effectively owed to the voters of South Carolina who have repeatedly been loyal to the party, not just black voters, but also working class voters who have been another integral part of Democratic support election after election. But she also pointed to the fact that they added 2 states today that previously would not have voted before Super Tuesday, when many states begin to vote. But now will vote early in February. Among them was New Mexico. New Mexico used to vote in the summer. Now they will vote in February. And New Mexico is a state that has nearly a 50% Latino population. So while in Nevada, they have a large Latino population, and they wanted the people from Nevada wanted Nevada to go first. There is sort of a consolation prize for those who are advocating for Latino voters. Here's how the chairwoman described it to me earlier.
I think that we expanded the calendar in a way that we have never done or ever even imagined that we could do. So including New Mexico, I think it's a huge deal, and it sends a huge signal to, I think, Hispanic voters, Latino voters, that we're focused on the issues that are impacting their communities as well, because we have never had a border state in our early window. So I just think that that's a big deal. It's more than just lip service. That's going to be real investment for the Democrats in New Mexico.
So the message there, and the message even talking to Ken Martin before he left here tonight, is that even though today was a big victory for South Carolina and arguably for black voters, Latino voters did not lose out. They are still getting something in the form of New Mexico moving up significantly in the calendar.
It'll be New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, New Mexico, as you said, Michigan, and Virginia all getting a vote before Super Tuesday. Clear your January and March if you're someone who covers all this. I know, Zach, you will be. I will be. A lot more to come. We appreciate it. Thank you, Zach. Coming up, Joe Manchin. Remember him? He's back. Our reporter panel is going to discuss a new plan that he has to get more centrists elected to office. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. There is some new polling out of Georgia offering competing situations in both of the elections down there that we are keeping close eyes on. AARP, yes, the Association of Retired People, who does some pretty reputable polling, has found Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff holding a 9-point lead in his reelection bid over Republican Congressman Mike Collins. But the governor's race is deadlocked. Former Atlanta mayor and Democrat Keisha Lance Bottoms slightly ahead of Republican Rick Jackson, but within the margin of error, which we call a tie. Our reporter panel is here with me to discuss. Kadia Goba is a reporter for Notice, News of the United States. And Tia Mitchell is the Washington bureau chief for the great Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Ladies, great to see you both. Tia, since you work for the AJC, how do you explain the discrepancy in these two races?
Well, the difference is Jon Ossoff is an incumbent, and he's been working it for 6 years of constituent services, getting out there, having events. Keisha Lance Bottoms, yes, she has held political office before in Atlanta,
right,
but she has not been in office for the last few years. She also, I think there are more questions about her. So the governor's race and the Senate races in Georgia, yes, they're on the same ballot, but they are two very different races. I think we should also point out that Jon Ossoff's Republican challenger is a sitting congressman who has his own record to run on. And that record, there are things that people might like, but I think people are also seeing things to criticize about Mike Collins.
Yeah. And this is also the kind of state that is more likely to split their ticket, right, historically, than to put members of one party in both of those big positions?
I will say that, if nothing, it's historically a state that Republicans win statewide. But what we have seen in recent years, particularly when Warnock won his reelection in 2022, yes, there were Warnock-Kemp voters where people voted for the incumbent Democratic senator and the incumbent Republican governor.
Yeah. So this will be a little different because it's an open governor's race. Kadia, I know you guys have been working on some reporting regarding how congressional Republicans are planning to run this fall by warning voters about how Democrats' policies will increase their taxes instead of touting the fact that they passed what is a pretty significant tax cut bill last summer. Why are they doing it this way?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think, every Republican in the House will go home and have to face their constituents talking about rising taxes, rising gas prices, increased food prices. A lot of them voted for or support Donald Trump, and they kind of blame him for the war, which is inflating or causing some of this inflation. So it is much easier to go home, rather talk about the one beautiful bill that they passed a year ago and talk about how dangerous it would be to elect a Democrat, or, how the New York trend where a lot of progressives beat a bunch of incumbents are, that could be a massive nationwide thing that people need to be careful about. So yeah, it's much easier to make Democrats the boogeyman when you're talking about when you have the presidency, both chambers, and you are trying to convince people to give you back the majority.
Yeah, it's amazing how they've struggled to sell this, much the same way that Democrats struggled to sell the Biden agenda back in 22 and even in 24. Real quick, I want to ask you too about this. Joe Manchin, remember him? Because, we haven't gone 3 months and not mentioned his name. And even in retirement, he finds a way. He is launching a group looking to elect independent candidates to Congress, suggesting it's not a third party, but a movement of people that will bring our country and the people who are participating in politics today more towards the center. You both cover Congress. You both cover politics. You get a sense that something like this would ever work?
I mean, I think it's, at the end of the day, we are a two-party nation right now. It's so hard for people who are not affiliated with one of the two political parties to advance. That's why we see so many Democratic socialists, self-identified Democratic socialists running as Democrats, because they know they need a major party backing. What we're also seeing in a lot of these primaries is people tend not to support centrist candidates in the primaries. And you got to get through a primary before you make it to a general election ballot. So it'll be, I think it's easier said than done. Also, we're hearing from voters a lot. They want someone who's going to fight. They don't necessarily like that centrist message. They don't necessarily like that message of we're going to try to get along and work towards the middle. Voters right now are fired up, whether you're on the right or you're left, and you want someone who's going to be fired up too.
From a governing perspective, if there was this coalition in the middle, it might work.
Yeah, but it's not happening. You look at Biden won, or Kamala Harris won districts, right? There's about 3 of them, and they are always contested.
Right.
And talk about Kevin Kiley right now. He's the one person who is an independent, so-called independent, but that was as a result of redistricting. I texted him earlier and asked him if he was going to be a part of it. He said he supports it, and he is looking forward to working with them. It might make him win his election. He doesn't vote independent. He votes with Republicans.
So we'll see. Nice try, Joe Manchin. Maybe, maybe not. Kadia Goba, Tia Mitchell, thank you both for being here. Have a good weekend.
Same to you.
All righty. LeBron James, maybe you heard, has decided on his 4th and what he says is final team for his illustrious NBA career. It is the Philadelphia 76ers. But are they any match for my defending champion New York Knicks? We'll discuss that next. Stay with us. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. My beloved NBA champion New York Knickerbockers have a new bold-faced name to compete with in the Eastern Conference. LeBron James, maybe you've heard of him, announced today he's signing a 2-year deal to play for the Philadelphia 76ers. This upcoming season will be the 4-time NBA champions' record-breaking 24th season. Tony Jones covers the 76ers for The Athletic and joins me now. Tony, I was reminded today he is 41 years old, and he is, of course, one of the greatest basketball players ever. Does he immediately make Philadelphia a contender, or does he at least just make them a topic of conversation?
I thought they were on the edges of contention even without him because of the Jaylen Brown acquisition and the trade with the Boston Celtics. So with him, I believe that they're firmly in the conversation in the Eastern Conference with the New York Knicks. And with the Oklahoma City Thunder and the San Antonio Spurs league-wide when you talk about, who can immediately win a championship.
And do you get a sense from what he said today that that's the calculation, or is there something that the Sixers offered that the Cavs and the Heat didn't?
Yeah, and talking to, people around LeBron, they made it clear that this was a decision based on where he had his best chance to win a championship. And, that conclusion was the Philadelphia 76ers. And if you look, up and down their lineup, even without LeBron, there are two All-NBA caliber players in Tyrese Maxey and Jaylen Brown. Obviously, Joel Embiid, when healthy, is still one of the best offensive players in basketball. And VJ Etchkum just came off of a rookie season where he was one of the top three or four rookies in the NBA. So, it's an imposing starting five with LeBron. You're bringing, the likes of Dean Wade and Anthony Simons off the bench, so it's going to come down to whether the Sixers can stay healthy enough, whether they can, find enough stops on the defensive end, and whether they have enough depth to get through 4 rounds of the playoffs. So it's definitely a team that's one of the more talented teams in the league at this point.
Given this is a program where perhaps sports isn't always top of mind for the viewer, I mentioned at the top, he's 41 years old. What does he do to keep fit enough, healthy enough, in shape enough to ensure that he is there playing all year long?
Well, he takes care of his body year-round, probably on par or like no other that has ever played the game. He famously invests $1 million a year into his body, into the upkeep of his body, and he's been remarkably durable throughout his career. Now, as he has aged in the last few years, he's had some injury issues. 2 years ago, he had a groin issue, and that led to the Los Angeles Lakers losing to the Minnesota Timberwolves in the first round. Last year, he had a bout with sciatica, which he termed was the ultimate old age injury. But by and large, he's, been one of the guys who just, takes care of his body, wakes up every day in the morning, gets his workout in, eats correctly, and keeps his weight where he needs it to be. So he's been somebody who's been as durable a superstar as we've ever seen.
May we all have $1 million lying around that just help take care of our own body. Tony Jones, you're going to have a busy season ahead of you covering the 76ers for The Athletic. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. We appreciate it. Coming up, a student reporter from Howard University will be honored at the Correspondents' Dinner tonight. She is here in studio to talk about that and what she wants out of a potential career in journalism. It's an inspiring conversation coming up on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. I know this is a program that usually eschews neckties, but you see it's time to get ready to go to dinner, because tonight the White House Correspondents' Dinner is set to honor student journalists and reporters from across the country. And one of those students is already dressed and ready to go. She joins me now, Howard University's Sonia Lucoma. She is press secretary of Howard's Student Association, the student government, right? President of their speech and debate team, the founder of the nonprofit Brown Kids Read, and they just told me she also happens to be Miss Howard. So you're busy.
Yeah, very much so.
It's a great treat to meet you. Thank you for stopping by before the dinner.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Because you really embody a big part of what this dinner is about, and that is honoring, rewarding student journalists and others who are studying journalism in various ways from across the country. And you all had to come back to town if you weren't already here, given what happened back in April. I know you were there. And it's funny because I remember that night thinking, and I think several of us thought, oh my gosh, those poor students who were here expecting one of the biggest moments of their young lives, and instead they got thrust into something that's sadly too common across the country, but totally unexpected in this setting. What was that night like for you?
Well, first, when I found out that I won the scholarship, I was gagged. I did not expect to, but I was so honored and excited for the opportunity. And then once we got to the dinner, I was excited because I was getting to enjoy my friends along with the honor of being a scholar. My friends Tati and Madison, they're also the scholars from Howard University. So we were vlogging, we were taking pictures. And when we went to the dinner, we expected to be eating dinner.
Yeah.
We didn't expect to be hiding under tables. That ended up being the case. But I think overall, what I took away from that night was beyond the politics and the fear. It was really the fact that journalists come together. Because as soon as we got up and we understood what was going on, we started doing stand-ups and recording the area and trying to document what was actually happening, which I thought was insane. But it was the root of what journalism truly is.
That's what we do, right?
Yeah.
Our instincts kicked in. What the heck's going on? We better figure it out and start telling people.
Right.
Now, you're also the executive director of the nonprofit Brown Kids Read,
Yes.
which helps with childhood literacy. And you started this when you were a teenager?
I started when I was 13. Yes. So I was in the 7th grade.
And what compelled you to do that?
I had a conversation when I was 12 with a friend who told me that he didn't like to read books anymore because none of the books in our school district represented young Puerto Rican boys like him. And that broke my heart because my parents were very intentional about providing me with books that were mirrors and windows when I was younger. So I was seeing people that represented my life, but I also got exposed to different cultures. And when I recognized that his experience was ubiquitous across the country, I knew I wanted to do something about it. And I wanted to make sure that students not only had books in their hands, but felt reflected in the stories that they were reading too.
And I understand you're trying to expand this and open a chapter at Howard?
Yes, so we're opening university chapter applications. This fall, we're starting with 10 chapters, our 10 founding presidents. Howard is going to be one of those schools. So I am so excited because we are multiplying the impact. Right now, we've given away over 16,000 books, but I want to amplify that number. I want to give away 1 million books over the next 5 years. So that's the goal. That's what our chapters are going to be working towards, and I'm really excited.
What other universities are you anticipating will be chapters?
We haven't accepted applications
you haven't yet. Okay, so
we're
you're looking for
them in a couple weeks.
Okay.
But I want to make sure that we're getting a diverse selection of schools. So I want PWIs, HBCUs, HSIs, PBIs, whatever type of school it is, I want those students to apply because the bottom line is kids need books, kids can't read, and college students are the ones who can do something about it.
And right now, what, in your view, appears to be the biggest barrier to childhood literacy? Is it AI? Is it the exposure to screens at an earlier age?
I think it's a combination of all of those things. So at Brown Kids Read, we focus on a few different issues. Number one, the representation aspect. In the publishing industry right now, only about 25% of children's books feature main characters of color. That's a problem because 75% is huge, it's huge disparity. The second part is making sure that children actually have books in their hands. So in lower income communities, parents can't afford to build a bookshelf at home full of books for their kids to read. They don't have time to take them to the library as often as other families do. And then in the schools, we're having less of a focus on literacy, on books, and we're moving into more digital forms of learning. And humans don't learn like that. We have to have physical books. So across all of those fronts, we have an issue. I'm just working to try and solve it.
Well, you're already doing so much, but what is the goal once you're out of Howard?
Oh my gosh, my dream grad program is the HBCU fellowship at Columbia University. So I would really love to go there for grad school to study strategic communications, but I also want to be a talk show host ultimately.
I heard about
this. So this is really ironic.
Well,
it's perfect.
So, it's funny you said that because when we heard that you were interested in this, we said, well, what the heck? Why don't we just give her her own shot here at closing things out? So you hear the music. You ever read a teleprompter before?
Yes.
All right, well, take us away.
Okay. That does it for the Takeout today. I'm Sonia Lacoma, in for Ed O'Keefe, who's in for Major Garrett. The Daily Report is coming up next.
All right, you know what you're doing.
Thank you.